Arthur Sterling was frantically searching for his late wife's vintage sapphire brooch, the solitary object that still seemed to hold her warmth, when his daughter, Vanessa, delivered a statement with chilling indifference. "The brooch is gone, Dad. I sold it. I needed the cash for a VIP upgrade on our Disney cruise." Reeling from the cruelty of her betrayal, Arthur immediately called the pawn shop, desperate to reclaim it. But the pawnbroker's voice on the other end froze him in place. "Mr. Sterling, you are not going to believe what we found when we accidentally triggered the mechanism behind the stone." That single, hidden secret was about to expose the ugly truth rotting at the heart of his family. The phone clicked into silence, but the pawnbroker's words continued to echo in Arthur Sterling's mind like a gavel striking a judge's bench. The ugly truth. A hidden mechanism. Arthur stood in the hallway of the house he had paid for, the house where he had raised Vanessa, and felt the walls closing in. He did not scream. He did not throw the phone. He was a man of numbers and precision, a forensic accountant who had spent 40 years untangling corporate fraud and embezzlement. When the numbers did not add up, one did not panic. One investigated. Arthur grabbed his raincoat and keys. His hands were trembling, not from age, but from a cold, simmering rage that he had not felt since his days auditing corrupt conglomerates. He walked past the guest room where Vanessa and her husband, Brock, were loudly discussing packing strategies for their Disney cruise. Their voices were grating and entitled, completely oblivious to the crater they had just blown into Arthur's soul. He slipped out the front door into the gray, weeping drizzle of a Seattle afternoon. The drive to the Golden Compass pawn shop took Arthur out of the manicured suburbs and into the scarred underbelly of the city. The rain smeared the windshield of his 10-year-old Volvo, distorting the neon signs of payday loan centers and liquor stores into blurry streaks of red and blue. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He tried to reconcile the image of his late wife, Margaret, with the idea of a hidden mechanism. Margaret loved gardening and classical piano. She was soft-spoken and gentle. She was the variable that had always balanced his rigid equation. The idea that she had a secret was mathematically impossible to his understanding of her, yet the data point had been presented, and Arthur never ignored data. He parked in front of the shop. It was a fortress of cynicism, with bars on the windows and a heavy steel door. Arthur took a breath, composed his face into a mask of professional neutrality, and stepped out into the rain. The bell above the door announced his arrival with a sharp, discordant chime. The interior smelled of dust, old electronics, and desperation. Glass cases were filled with the debris of broken dreams such as wedding rings, power tools, and musical instruments that would never be played again. Behind the counter stood a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He had a thick neck and eyes that were constantly assessing value and risk. This was Russo. "You are Mr. Sterling," the man said. It was not a question. "I am," Arthur replied. His voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil churning in his gut. "I believe you have something that belongs to my wife." Russo nodded slowly. He reached under the counter and produced a small velvet pouch. He handled it with a reverence that surprised Arthur. He placed it on the scratched glass surface of the counter and unfolded the cloth. There it was. The vintage sapphire brooch. The deep blue stone caught the fluorescent light of the shop, glowing with an intensity that made Arthur's chest ache. He remembered the day he had given it to Margaret for their 30th anniversary. She had cried. She had worn it to every church service, every wedding, and every funeral for 15 years. Seeing it here, amidst the pawn debris of strangers, felt like a violation. "Your daughter," Russo said, his voice lowering to a rumble. "She came in here fast. Nervous. She did not know what she had. She just wanted quick cash. She took $1,500 for it. Arthur stared at the brooch. She sold memories for pocket change, he whispered. Rousseau leaned forward, his heavy forearms resting on the glass. That is not why I called you, Mr. Sterling. Dealing with desperate kids selling their parents' heirlooms is just Tuesday for me. But I have been in this business 30 years. I know jewelry. When I was cleaning it, checking the setting, I noticed the weight was off. Just a fraction of a gram. The balance was wrong. The pawnbroker picked up the brooch. He turned it over, revealing the intricate gold filigree on the back. Watch closely. Rousseau took a small jeweler's tool and pressed a tiny, almost invisible indentation near the clasp. Simultaneously, he rotated the large central sapphire clockwise. It moved. Arthur gasped. He had held this object 1,000 times and never knew the stone could move. With a soft mechanical click, the setting popped open like a locket, but it was not a locket. It was a hidden compartment, masterfully engineered into the body of the jewelry. Nestled inside the hollow space behind the stone was a silver key, smaller than a fingernail, and a thin strip of metallic paper with numbers laser etched onto the surface. Arthur felt the ground shift beneath his feet. This was tradecraft. This was something out of a spy novel, not the jewelry box of a retired piano teacher. I did not touch the paper, Rousseau said, pushing the brooch across the counter. And I did not tell your daughter. She was too busy counting the hundreds to notice me checking the merchandise. Arthur reached out and touched the cold metal. His mind was racing, analyzing, processing. Margaret. His Margaret. Why would she need a hiding place this sophisticated? What was she protecting? Or who was she hiding it from? How much to get it back? Arthur asked, his eyes not leaving the tiny silver key. Rousseau sighed. I gave her $1,500. The gold and the stone alone are worth $3,000. The craftsmanship is priceless. But for you, knowing what she did. Give me $2,000 and we are square. I am running a business, not a charity, but I am not a monster. Arthur pulled out his wallet. He laid his credit card on the counter. Charge it. As he waited for the transaction to process, Arthur looked at the key again. The numbers on the metal strip were familiar. They were not random. He recognized the sequence structure. It was a bank routing format, followed by a box number. But the bank indicated by the prefix was not their joint family bank. It was Chase, a bank Arthur never used. He signed the receipt with a flourish of his pen, a sharp, jagged signature that looked like a scar on the paper. He took the brooch, snapped the secret compartment shut, and placed it securely in his inner coat pocket, right against his heart. Thank you, Mr. Rousseau, Arthur said. You have done more than you know. Rousseau looked at him, his eyes softening slightly. Good luck, Mr. Sterling. Whatever you find at the end of that key, I hope it is worth the trouble. Arthur walked back out into the rain. The gray sky seemed darker now, the city more hostile. He sat in his car, the engine idling, the wipers slapping back and forth like a metronome counting down the seconds of his old life. He looked at the Golden Compass pawn shop one last time. Vanessa had come here to erase the past for a quick payout. Instead, she had inadvertently handed Arthur the first clue to a puzzle he had not known existed. He put the car in gear. He was not going home. Not yet. The forensic accountant in him had been dormant since retirement, buried under grief and the desire to be a gentle grandfather. But now, the auditor was awake. There was a discrepancy in the ledger of his life, a hidden column of figures that Margaret had kept secret. And Arthur Sterling never left an audit unfinished. He turned the wheel and headed toward downtown Seattle, toward the bank, toward the truth. The sadness was still there, a heavy stone in his gut, but it was being rapidly calcified by a cold, hard curiosity. He needed to see what was in the box. The rain had not let up by the time Arthur parked his Volvo in the underground garage of the Chase Bank Tower on 4th Avenue. The concrete structure felt like a bunker, cold and impersonal, a fitting setting for what he was about to do. He checked his coat pocket to ensure the sapphire brooch was still there, the tiny silver key warm against his chest. He walked into the lobby with the stiff gait of a man marching to his own execution, bypassing the tellers and heading straight for the desk marked Safe Deposit Services. A young woman with professional detachment assisted him. When Arthur presented the laser-etched code from the metallic strip hidden in the brooch, her eyebrows lifted slightly. It was an old account, dormant for years but fully paid up. She verified his identity, her keystrokes loud in the quiet room, and then led him through the heavy steel gate into the vault. The air inside was recycled and smelled of ozone and dust. Rows of metal drawers lined the walls from floor to ceiling, a library of secrets kept by the dead and the paranoid. Box 804, the woman said, sliding the long metal container out of its slot after Arthur inserted the tiny key. She carried it to a private viewing room, placed it on the table, and closed the door, leaving him alone with the silence. Arthur sat for a long moment, his hands hovering over the lid. He was a forensic accountant who had spent decades exposing hidden assets and offshore accounts, yet he was terrified to open a metal box left by his own wife. He took a breath that rattled in his chest and lifted the lid. Inside, neat stacks of paper were arranged with military precision. Arthur recognized the documents immediately. They were certificates of deposit and bearer bonds, mature and accumulating interest for over a decade. Underneath the bonds lay thick bundles of cash, wrapped in bank bands. Arthur did mental arithmetic instantly, his professional instincts kicking in despite the emotional fog. Based on the denominations and the dates on the bonds, the contents of the box totaled nearly $280,000. He stared at the money. Margaret had been a piano teacher. She had scrimped on groceries, mended her own clothes, and drove a car until it fell apart. Where had this come from? Then he saw the envelope resting on top of the cash. It was cream-colored stationery, the kind she used to write thank you notes on, with his name, Arthur, written in her elegant, looping script. His hands shook violently as he tore open the envelope. He unfolded the single sheet of paper, and suddenly, Margaret was in the room with him. "My dearest Arthur, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you have finally found the courage to look for the truth. Please do not be angry that I kept this from you. I did it because I love you, and because I know your fatal flaw. You are too kind. You forgive too easily. You see the best in people even when they show you their worst. I saved this money over 30 years. I invested the small inheritance from my aunt that I told you went to charity. I skimmed from the household budget. I played the stock market quietly. I did this because I saw what you refused to see. Vanessa is not like us, Arthur. She has a hunger in her that cannot be filled. She and Brock see you not as a father, but as a resource. A host. I have watched them drain your spirit and your wallet while I was alive to act as a buffer. But without me, they will consume you. They will take the house, your pension, and your dignity, and they will justify it as their right. This money is your escape hatch. It is your armor. Do not give them a cent of this. Not one penny. Use it to protect yourself. Use it to reclaim the life you sacrificed for a daughter who would sell my memory for a vacation. I love the husband who brought me coffee in bed every morning. But right now, I need the Arthur Sterling who took down corrupt CEOs. I need the auditor. Wake him up, Arthur. Audit our life. See the truth. And then do what needs to be done. Love always, Margaret. Arthur put the letter down. A tear leaked from his eye and tracked through the wrinkles on his cheek, dropping onto the mahogany table. He sat there for 10 minutes, letting the words sink into his marrow. Vanessa is not like us. A host. A resource. The grief that had been strangling him for 3 years began to change shape. It cooled and hardened, transforming from a suffocating blanket into a sharp, icy blade. He thought of Vanessa's face when she told him she had sold the brooch. He thought of Brock's mocking laughter. He thought of his grandson, Caleb, ignoring him while eating food Arthur had paid for. Margaret was right. He had been blind. He had allowed his love for his family to obscure the data. In his profession, ignoring data was negligence. Ignoring fraud was a crime. And his life had become a massive, fraudulent scheme where he was the sole investor and his family were the embezzlers. Arthur wiped his face with his handkerchief. He folded the letter with precise, sharp creases and placed it in his inside pocket next to the brooch. He put the cash and bonds back into the box. He would not move the assets yet. That would trigger alerts. He needed a plan. He stood up and caught his reflection in the mirror on the wall. The man looking back was still old, still gray, but the eyes were different. The watery, pleading look of a lonely widower was gone. In its place was the flat, analytical stare of a man who had just found a discrepancy in the ledger. Arthur Sterling walked out of the viewing room. He returned the box to the vault and thanked the woman at the desk. His voice was firm, devoid of the tremor that had been there when he arrived. He walked out of the bank and into the rain, but he no longer felt the cold. He had work to do. He had an audit to conduct, and he was going to be thorough. The time for being a father was over. It was time to be the auditor. Arthur pulled his Volvo into the driveway of the 2-story colonial house he had purchased 35 years ago. The rain had stopped, leaving the asphalt slick and black, reflecting the streetlights that were just flickering to life. He sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, breathing in the scent of old leather and rain. Before today, this house had been his sanctuary, a repository of memories where he and Margaret had raised a child and planned a quiet retirement. Now, through the lens of the auditor, it looked different. It looked like a distressed asset. It looked like a crime scene where the theft was ongoing and the perpetrators were sleeping in the guest bedrooms. He stepped out of the car, his movements deliberate. He touched his chest pocket one last time to reassure himself that the brooch and the letter were safe, then he walked to the front door. He could hear the chaos from the porch. Shouting, the thud of heavy footsteps, the blare of the television. It was the sound of a hostile takeover. Arthur unlocked the door and stepped into the foyer. The hallway was an obstacle course of open suitcases, piles of clothes, and discarded shopping bags. Vanessa was in the living room, frantically folding brightly colored resort wear. She did not look up when the door closed. "Where have you been, Dad?" She shouted over her shoulder, her voice shrill with stress. "I needed you to pick up my dry cleaning an hour ago. Now I have to do it myself before we leave for the airport tomorrow morning." Arthur stood by the coat rack, watching her. In the past, he would have stammered an apology. He would have rushed back out to the car, eager to be useful, eager to buy a moment of affection with his servitude. But the man standing in the hallway now was not the father who craved approval. He was the forensic accountant observing a subject. "I went for a drive," Arthur said softly. His voice was raspy, intentionally weak. He let his shoulders slump forward, mimicking the posture of the defeated old man they believed him to be. The mask slid into place with terrifying ease. Vanessa finally looked at him, her eyes scanning him not with concern, but with annoyance. "Well, you missed the window. Brock is furious because his golf shirts are not ready. You know how he gets when his routine is disrupted." From the kitchen, the heavy, lumbering figure of Brock appeared. He was holding a beer, one of the imported craft brews Arthur stocked for special occasions, which Brock drank like water. He was wearing sweatpants and a tight t-shirt that strained against his gut. "Nice of you to join us, Arthur," Brock said, taking a swig of the beer. "We are running around like headless chickens trying to get ready for this trip, and you are out joyriding. Hope you filled the tank. I need to take your car to the airport lot since the SUV is in the shop again." Arthur looked at the beer bottle. $7 a bottle. Case of 12. $84 consumed in 2 days. He looked at the television behind Vanessa, a massive 65-inch OLED screen they had insisted was necessary for Caleb's gaming. $2,000, charged to the household credit card Arthur paid off monthly. "I am sorry," Arthur said, infusing his tone with a tremulous, pathetic quality. "I just needed some air." I felt a bit confused about the time. Brock snorted, exchanging a look with Vanessa. "Confused? Yeah, that is becoming a theme, isn't it? Maybe while we are on the cruise, you should look into those brochures I left on your desk. Assisted living communities. They have schedules there. Might help with the confusion." The threat was thinly veiled, wrapped in faux concern. Arthur felt a spike of cold rage, but he swallowed it down. He needed them to feel secure. He needed them to think he was fading, that his mind was a crumbling fortress they could easily conquer. If they thought he was weak, they would get sloppy. And sloppy subjects made mistakes. "I will look at them," Arthur murmured, looking down at his shoes. Caleb, his 19-year-old grandson, walked past him wearing noise-canceling headphones, eyes glued to a new smartphone. He bumped into Arthur's shoulder without acknowledging his existence, heading straight for the fridge to grab a soda. Arthur watched the interaction with clinical detachment. They were not a family. They were a syndicate. Vanessa was the front woman, using emotional manipulation. Brock was the enforcer, using intimidation. Caleb was the beneficiary, absorbing resources without contributing value. "Are you going to help me pack this?" Vanessa snapped, holding up a stack of bikinis. "Or are you just going to stand there staring?" "I am tired, Vanessa," Arthur said. "I think I will just go to my room and rest. You all have a big day tomorrow." Vanessa rolled her eyes, throwing the bikinis into the suitcase. "Fine. Just stay out of the way. And do not forget to feed the cat while we are gone. If anything happens to Mr. Whiskers, Caleb will be devastated." Arthur nodded slowly and shuffled toward the hallway leading to the master bedroom on the ground floor. He walked with a slight limp that he did not actually have. He heard Brock mutter something about useless old baggage as he turned the corner. Once he was inside his room, Arthur closed the door and turned the lock. The click of the latch was the sweetest sound he had heard all day. He stood in the center of the room, the only space in the house that still felt like his, though Vanessa had started storing her overflow winter coats in his closet. He straightened his back. The slump vanished. The confusion cleared from his eyes, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. He took off his raincoat and hung it up carefully. He took the sapphire brooch and the letter from his pocket and placed them in his bedside drawer, locking that too. He sat down at his desk, a heavy oak piece that had been his father's. He turned on his computer. It was password protected, but he knew Vanessa had guessed his old password, which was simply Margaret's birthday. She used it to order things on Amazon when she thought he wasn't looking. Arthur's fingers flew across the keyboard. He changed the password to an alphanumeric string based on the serial number of the first fraud case he had ever solved. He opened a new folder and named it the Sterling Audit. He could hear them outside his door, laughing now, talking about the excursions they would take, the dinners they would eat, the money they would spend. His money. "Enjoy your vacation," Arthur whispered to the empty room. "Because when you come back, the bank is closing." He did not see his family anymore. He saw liabilities. He saw unauthorized expenditures. He saw a hemorrhage of assets that had to be stopped. He was no longer the grieving widower or the pushover father. He was the auditor, and he was about to conduct the most thorough investigation of his career. The house was quiet in his room, but outside, the parasites were feasting. Arthur opened a spreadsheet, his eyes reflecting the blue light of the monitor, and began to type. The morning departure was a masterclass in organized chaos. Suitcases were dragged across the hardwood floors, leaving scuff marks that Arthur noted for his mental inventory. Vanessa shouted orders at Brock about passports and sunscreen, while Brock complained about the earliness of the hour. Caleb merely grunted, shuffling out the door with his headphones already on, oblivious to the world. They did not say goodbye to Arthur. Vanessa simply shouted from the driveway, "Do not forget the cat, Dad. And make sure you bring in the mail." Then, silence. The heavy, profound silence of an empty house. Arthur stood at the window, watching the tail lights of the Uber Black vanish around the corner. An Uber Black. To the airport. $150, charged, no doubt, to the family emergency credit card he paid off every month. He turned away from the window. The slump in his shoulders evaporated. The shuffle in his step was replaced by a purposeful stride. He went to the hall closet and retrieved a small, nondescript cardboard box that had arrived 2 days prior, disguised as a shipment of vitamins. Inside were 3 high-definition cameras masquerading as smoke detectors and motion sensors. Arthur spent the next 2 hours installing them. He placed one in the living room, covering the couch and the television area. He placed another in the kitchen, angled to capture the dining table and the refrigerator. The third went in the hallway, covering the entrance to his bedroom. He synced them to a secure cloud server, testing the audio and video feed on his encrypted laptop. The image was crisp, the sound sensitive enough to pick up the hum of the refrigerator. Phase 1 complete. Now for the autopsy. Arthur sat at his heavy oak desk, a fresh pot of black coffee steaming beside him. He opened the file he had named the Sterling Audit. He logged into the online banking portal for the joint account he shared with Vanessa, a convenience set up years ago to help her manage household bills after Margaret died. He also accessed his personal credit card statements, to which he had foolishly added authorized user cards for Brock and Caleb for emergencies. He began to download. 3 years of statements. 36 months of financial activity. Thousands of transactions. He imported the data into his spreadsheet. He created columns: date, merchant, amount, authorized user, and classification. Then, he began the grueling work of categorization. The first hour was shocking. By the third hour, The shock had calcified into a cold, hard fury. He found the Disney cruise charge immediately. $5,200 for a VIP upgrade. It was dated the day before Vanessa sold the sapphire brooch. She had not sold the brooch to pay for the upgrade. She had sold it to replace the cash she had already spent, perhaps to hide the dent in the savings account before the statement arrived. He scrolled back further. March 12th. A charge for $1,200 at a local auto shop. Classification: Brock's truck repair. Arthur cross-referenced this with the family calendar. That weekend, Brock had driven the truck to a golf tournament in Portland. There had been no repair. Arthur called the auto shop, identifying himself as the account holder. The mechanic confirmed the invoice was for a set of custom rims and high-performance tires, not an engine repair as Brock had claimed. Fraud. January 4th. Caleb. $300 in microtransactions for a mobile game called Warlords of Ruin. Then another $50 for Uber Eats at 2 in the morning. Then a recurring subscription to 3 different streaming services that Arthur never watched. Misappropriation of funds. Arthur's fingers flew across the number pad. He highlighted rows in red for unauthorized luxury expenses, yellow for questionable necessities, and green for actual household maintenance. The screen became a sea of red. Vanessa's business expenses for her failed real estate ventures were particularly egregious. Lunches at 5-star restaurants. A lease on a luxury sedan she claimed was necessary for client meetings, though she had not closed a sale in 18 months. Designer handbags classified as office supplies. Arthur paused, taking a sip of cold coffee. He looked at the total at the bottom of the spreadsheet. Over the last 3 years, the total amount of money siphoned from his accounts, excluding legitimate utilities and groceries, was $42,850. $42,000. That was more than Margaret's annual salary as a teacher had been for most of her life. It was a college fund. It was a new roof. It was security. Arthur stared at the number. It was not just bad budgeting. It was predation. They were eating him alive, bite by bite, transaction by transaction. They relied on his grief to keep him blind, and his desire for peace to keep him silent. He saved the spreadsheet. He backed it up to an external drive and then to a cloud account. He printed a summary page, the colors vivid on the stark white paper. He looked around his office. It felt different now. It was no longer a study, it was a command center. The evidence was irrefutable. The intent was malicious. The audit was yielding results that would stand up in any court of law. Arthur leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking in the silence. He felt a strange sense of calm. The anxiety of the unknown was gone. He knew exactly who lived in his house now. He knew exactly what they cost him. And when they returned from their $5,000 vacation, Arthur Sterling would present them with the invoice. The peace of the last 5 days ended with the slam of a car door. It was followed by the heavy thud of suitcases being dragged up the walkway and the distinct, grating sound of Brock complaining about the humidity. Arthur sat in his armchair in the living room, a book open on his lap, though he had not read a page in an hour. He checked his phone one last time. The recording app was running in the background, high sensitivity mode engaged. The cameras he had installed were blinking their tiny, invisible red eyes from the smoke detectors. The trap was set. The front door burst open. Vanessa swept in, wearing a straw hat that looked ridiculous in the Seattle drizzle and dragging a suitcase that was visibly heavier than when she left. She did not say hello. She did not ask how he was. She dropped her bag in the middle of the foyer and sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation of suffering. "Home sweet hell," she muttered. Brock followed, his face sunburned to angry red. He kicked the door shut with his heel. The traffic on I-5 was a nightmare. "Next time we fly private or I am not going." Arthur stood up slowly, leaning heavily on the cane he had started using solely for this performance. "Welcome back," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "How was the trip?" Vanessa flopped onto the sofa, displacing Arthur's carefully folded blanket. "It was fine, I guess. The VIP deck was overcrowded. And the buffet ran out of crab legs on the second night. Can you believe that? $5,000 and no crab legs." Arthur felt a flicker of cold amusement. $5,000 of his money. "I am sorry to hear that," Arthur said. Vanessa sat up, her eyes suddenly sharp. "Look, Dad, the trip gave me a lot of time to think. About us. About the future. Here it comes," Arthur thought. "The pivot." She patted the cushion beside her. "Sit down, Dad. We need to have a serious family meeting." Arthur remained standing. "I am fine here, Vanessa." "What is it?" Vanessa exchanged a look with Brock, who had moved to the kitchen to raid the refrigerator for a beer. She cleared her throat. "You know, my real estate staging business has been struggling a bit. The market is tough. But I have a golden opportunity. A partner wants to bring me in on a luxury condo development. It is a guaranteed return, Dad. Guaranteed." She paused, waiting for his enthusiasm. When none came, she continued, her voice taking on that wheedling, manipulative tone he knew so well. "I just need a buy-in. $50,000. And since you have all this equity sitting in the house doing nothing, I thought we could take out a small home equity line of credit. Just until the project pays out." Arthur tightened his grip on the cane. She wanted to mortgage his home. The home he had paid off 20 years ago. The home she was living in rent-free. "I do not know, Vanessa," Arthur said, making sure to sound uncertain and fearful. "The bank interest rates are high. I promised your mother I would never put debt on the house again." "Oh, stop living in the past." Brock shouted from the kitchen. He walked in, a beer already open, foam dripping onto his hand. He loomed over Arthur, using his height and bulk to intimidate. "Margaret is dead, Arthur. You are the one still here, and you are sitting on a pile of cash while your daughter busts her back trying to make something of herself." "It is risky," Arthur whispered. "Life is risky, old man," Brock sneered. He took a swig of beer, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Look, let us be real here. You are slipping. We see it. The forgetting things. The confusion. The wandering off in the rain." Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs, not from fear, but from adrenaline. He was giving them the rope, and they were tying the noose with enthusiasm. "I am not slipping," Arthur said, injecting a note of defensive panic into his voice. "You are," Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper that was far worse than Brock's shouting. "We are worried about you, Dad. This house, it is too much for you to manage. The maintenance, the bills. If you sign the house over to me, I can manage the equity loan, and we can take care of everything. You will not have to worry about a thing." "And if I say no?" Arthur asked. Brock stepped closer. He smelled of stale airplane air and alcohol. "Then maybe we have to look at other options." Professional options. There is a place over on Cedar Street. Shady Pines or something. Assisted living. They specialize in difficult cases. If you cannot make rational decisions about your assets, the court might appoint a guardian to make them for you. And trust me, Arthur, you do not want to end up in a state facility. The threat hung in the air, heavy and toxic. They were threatening to declare him incompetent, to lock him away and seize his assets through legal guardianship. It was the nuclear auction, and they had just deployed it. Arthur looked from Brock's red, arrogant face to Vanessa's feigned concern. He saw them clearly now. There was no love here, only hunger. "I need to think about it," Arthur said, his voice barely a whisper. "Please. Just let me sleep on it." Brock laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Sure. Sleep on it. But have the papers ready tomorrow. We are not playing games anymore." Arthur turned and walked back to his room. He felt Brock's eyes boring into his back. He entered his sanctuary and locked the door. He moved immediately to his computer and pulled up the audio file from the recording app. He played it back. The quality was crystal clear. If you cannot make rational decisions, the court might appoint a guardian, state facility. Arthur saved the file. He named it evidence number 4, threat of guardianship and extortion. He sat back in his chair, his hands steady. They thought they had broken him. They thought he was trembling in fear of a nursing home. They had no idea that he was the one holding the keys to their destruction. He picked up his phone and dialed the number he had memorized from his research. Elias Thorne, attorney at law. The line rang twice before a receptionist answered. "I need an appointment," Arthur said, his voice strong and clear, the tremor gone completely. "Tomorrow morning. My name is Arthur Sterling. I am a retired forensic accountant, and I have a case of elder abuse and financial fraud I need to prosecute." He hung up. The audit was complete. Now, it was time to execute the findings. The rain in Seattle was a constant, gray companion as Arthur Sterling navigated his Volvo through the downtown traffic. He had left the house at 7 in the morning, while the house was still silent and smelling faintly of the pizza Brock had consumed the night before. He had told Vanessa through a closed door that he was going to the pharmacy. In reality, he was going to war. The offices of Thorne and Associates were located on the 42nd floor of the Columbia Center. The view from the conference room was a panoramic sweep of the city, gray water meeting gray sky, but inside, everything was polished mahogany and sharp, expensive light. Elias Thorne did not look like a man who comforted the elderly. He looked like a man who dismantled problems with a scalpel. He was in his late 40s, wearing a suit that cost more than Arthur's car, and he had the eyes of a predator who had decided to fight for the sheep. Arthur sat at the long table, his spine straight. He placed a thick binder in front of him. It was organized with tabs, color-coded and cross-referenced. "Mr. Thorne," Arthur began, his voice devoid of the quaver he used at home. "I am not here for sympathy. I am here for a strategy." Elias Thorne opened the binder. He flipped through the pages of the Sterling audit. He saw the spreadsheet detailing the $42,000 in misappropriated funds. He saw the transcript of the recording where Brock threatened guardianship. He saw the photos of the damage to the hardwood floors and the unauthorized modifications to the garage. Thorne stopped at the page detailing the sale of the sapphire brooch. He looked up, and for a moment, the professional mask slipped, revealing genuine disgust. "They sold your late wife's jewelry to upgrade a cruise cabin?" Thorne asked quietly. "They did," Arthur confirmed. And then they threatened to put me in a state facility if I did not sign over the deed to my house. Thorne closed the binder and leaned back. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Mr. Sterling, usually when clients come to me with elder abuse cases, I have to spend weeks digging for evidence. You have just handed me a smoking gun, the bullets, and a signed confession. This is not just a civil matter. This borders on criminal extortion. I do not want them in jail, Arthur said, though the thought had crossed his mind. I want them out of my house. I want them out of my life. And I want to ensure they can never challenge my competency or my estate. Thorne nodded. Then we need to change the narrative. Right now, you are the doting father letting them crash. In the eyes of the law, they are guests. We need to convert them into tenants. And then, we evict them. Thorne pulled a legal pad toward him. We are going to draft a residential lease agreement. It will be strict. It will be non-negotiable. And it will be retroactive in establishing the terms of their occupancy starting the 1st of next month. Arthur watched as Thorne began to outline the terms. Rent, Thorne said, writing rapidly. The market rate for a 4-bedroom home in your neighborhood is roughly $3,000. We will set it at $2,500 to appear reasonable to a judge. Utilities will be split 50-50. Arthur nodded. Add a security deposit. First and last month's rent. Agreed, Thorne said. And we will include a code of conduct clause. No noise after 10 at night. No unauthorized guests for more than 2 consecutive nights. No alterations to the property. And immediate access for the landlord for inspection purposes. Thorne looked up, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. When you present this to them, they are going to explode. They will refuse to sign. I know, Arthur said. That is the point, Thorne continued. Their refusal to sign a reasonable lease agreement, combined with the evidence of their financial exploitation and threats, gives us the grounds for a construct eviction and a restraining order. We are baiting a trap, Arthur. We are forcing them to show a judge exactly who they are. Arthur felt a surge of grim satisfaction. It was the same feeling he used to get when he found the one transaction that unraveled a Ponzi scheme. It was the feeling of control. Thorne pressed a button on his intercom. Sarah, bring in the standard lease template and the elder protection filing kit. For the next hour, they worked. Arthur dictated the specific behaviors he wanted banned. No smoking in the house. No eating in the living room. No borrowing of the landlord's vehicle without written permission. Every rule was a direct countermeasure to a specific grievance Arthur had endured for 3 years. By the time the document was printed, it was 12 pages of dense, ironclad legal prose. It was a shield and a sword rolled into one. Thorne handed Arthur the document, along with a second envelope. This is the lease, Thorne said. And inside this envelope is a draft of a new will and a durable power of attorney naming me as your agent. If they try to declare you incompetent, I will step in. And I promise you, they do not want to go toe-to-toe with me in probate court. Arthur took the documents. He felt lighter than he had in years. The fear of the nursing home, the fear of losing his autonomy, it was gone. He had a champion now. He had a team. One last thing, Thorne said as they stood up to shake hands. When you give them this lease, do not argue. Do not justify. You are the landlord. They are the tenants. It is a business transaction. If they scream, let them scream. Just make sure the cameras are rolling." "They are always rolling," Arthur said. He left the office and stepped back into the elevator. As he descended 42 floors, he looked at the lease agreement in his hand. It was just paper, but to him, it looked like a declaration of independence. He walked to his car, placed the folder on the passenger seat, and began the drive back to the house. He was no longer driving home to his family. He was driving to a property to serve notice to delinquent occupants. The auditor was coming to collect. The smell of pepperoni and stale grease hung heavy in the dining room air. It was 6:30 in the evening, and the kitchen table, a beautiful mahogany piece that Margaret had polished every Sunday for 20 years, was currently invisible beneath a sprawling layer of cardboard pizza boxes, crumpled napkins, and open soda cans. Caleb was scrolling on his phone with one hand while shoving a slice into his mouth with the other. Brock was loudly recounting a dispute he had with a parking attendant, spraying crumbs as he spoke. Vanessa was picking toppings off her slice, complaining about the calories while eating them anyway. Arthur Sterling stood in the doorway, a ghost in his own home. He held the blue folder containing the 12-page lease agreement Elias Thorne had drafted that morning. His heart was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm, not out of fear, but out of anticipation. This was the moment the audit moved from investigation to enforcement. He walked to the head of the table. No one looked up. Arthur cleared his throat, a sharp, authoritative sound that cut through Brock's story. Brock stopped chewing and glared. "What is it, Arthur?" "We are trying to eat here. You want a slice?" "There is some mushroom left in the box on the floor." Arthur did not answer. He placed the blue folder on the table, right on top of a grease-stained napkin. The sound of the heavy paper hitting the wood was quiet, yet it seemed to echo like a gunshot. "What is this?" Vanessa asked, wiping her hands on her jeans and reaching for the folder. "It is a residential lease agreement," Arthur said. His voice was steady, stripped of all emotion. It was the voice he used to use when presenting a final audit report to a board of directors. Vanessa flipped it open. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the second. Her brow furrowed in confusion, then shot up in disbelief. "Rent?" She sputtered, her voice rising an octave. $2,500 a month. Security deposit. Background check. "Dad, is this some kind of sick joke?" Brock snatched the document from her hand. He read it quickly, his face turning a shade of purple that matched the pepperoni. "You want to charge us rent? In this house?" Brock roared. He threw the folder back onto the table, knocking over a can of soda. Dark liquid spilled across the wood, dripping onto the floor. No one moved to clean it up. "It is standard procedure for tenants who occupy a property they do not own," Arthur said calmly, ignoring the spill. "The market rate for a home of this square footage in this neighborhood is $3,000. I am offering you a family discount at $2,500. Utilities will be split 50-50 based on occupancy. You cannot do this." Vanessa shrieked, standing up. She knocked her chair back, and it clattered to the floor. "This is my house too. I grew up here." "You grew up here," Arthur corrected gently. "You do not own here. The deed is in my name. The mortgage was paid by my labor. You are guests who have overstayed your welcome by 3 years." Caleb looked up from his phone, finally engaged. "Grandpa, you are literally insane. You cannot charge your own family to live. That is, like, illegal or something." "Actually," Arthur said, turning his gaze to his grandson, "it is perfectly legal. In fact, living here without a formal agreement makes you tenants at will. This document simply formalizes the arrangement. It also includes a code of conduct. No noise after 10. No smoking. No unauthorized guests. And cleanliness standards must be maintained. He gestured to the pizza boxes and the spilled soda. Brock stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow over Arthur. He stepped close, invading Arthur's personal space, smelling of meat and aggression. "Listen to me, old man," Brock growled. "We are not signing anything. You are losing it. We have been taking care of you. We are the only reason you are not rotting in a home somewhere. And this is how you repay us. By trying to squeeze us for money we do not have." "I know exactly how much money you have," Arthur said. He did not back down. He did not blink. "I know about the $5,000 for the cruise upgrade. I know about the $1,200 for the truck tires. I know about the $42,000 you have siphoned from my accounts over the last 36 months. The room went deadly silent. Vanessa went pale. Brock's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Caleb took his headphones off completely. "You checked the accounts?" Vanessa whispered. "I audited them," Arthur corrected. "Every penny. Every transaction. Every lie." He pointed a finger at the lease agreement. "You have two choices. Option A is to sign this lease and begin paying rent on the 1st of the month. You will reimburse the household account for the unauthorized expenditures over a period of 24 months. Option B is to refuse. If you refuse, this document serves as your official 30-day notice to vacate the premises." 30 days. Vanessa cried, tears welling up in her eyes instantly. "Where are we supposed to go? We cannot afford a deposit on a new place. We spent everything on things for the family." "You spent it on a vacation," Arthur said. "And I suggest you start looking for a cheaper apartment. Perhaps one that fits your actual budget, not the one you stole from me." Brock slammed his fist onto the table, making the silverware jump. "I am not going anywhere. You hear me? This is my home. I have put work into this place." "You changed a light bulb in the hallway last year," Arthur said. "That does not constitute equity." He turned and walked toward the kitchen door. He could feel their eyes burning into his back. He could feel the explosive violence radiating from Brock, the desperate manipulation coiling in Vanessa. But he also felt something else. He felt the protective weight of the cameras recording every second of this interaction. He felt the phantom presence of Margaret standing beside him, whispering, "Do not stop. You have until the 1st of the month to decide," Arthur said without turning around. "I suggest you read the clause regarding property damage carefully. The security deposit is steep." He left the room, leaving them amidst the ruin of their dinner and the wreckage of their delusions. As he walked down the hallway to his room, he heard the first crash of something glass shattering against the wall. He did not flinch. He simply noted the time for the evidence log. 7:05 in the evening. Destruction of property. The audit continued. The morning sun did nothing to warm the chill inside the Sterling residence. Arthur stood at the kitchen counter, brewing his coffee with the methodical precision of a chemist. The shattered remains of a glass vase lay swept into a pile near the trash can, a testament to the previous night's tantrum. On the table, the blue folder containing the lease agreement sat exactly where he had left it, untouched, as if it were radioactive. Arthur heard the heavy, thumping footsteps before he saw him. Brock entered the kitchen, wearing only boxer shorts and a stained undershirt. His eyes were bloodshot, and he radiated the sour smell of stale beer and aggression. He stopped in the doorway, blocking the exit with his massive frame. "You think you are funny, do you not, Arthur?" Brock rumbled, his voice thick with sleep and malice. Arthur did not turn around. He focused on the stream of dark liquid filling the carafe. "I am not trying to be funny, Brock. I am trying to run a household solvently." Brock stepped into the room. The floorboards creaked under his weight. "You are trying to humiliate us. Asking for rent? From your own daughter. After everything we have done for you." "You have done nothing for me," Arthur said, turning slowly to face him. "You have lived here for 3 years. You have contributed $0 to the mortgage, $0 to the utilities, and negative $42,000 to my retirement savings. The free ride is over." Brock's face darkened, turning a mottled shade of crimson. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He towered over Arthur, 6 feet 2 inches of unemployed frustration against 5 feet 9 inches of retired accountant. "You listen to me, you ungrateful old miser," Brock spat, flecks of spittle hitting Arthur's cheek. "We are not going anywhere. And we are not paying you a dime. You are going to tear up that lease, and you are going to sign the house over to Vanessa like she asked. Or things are going to get very uncomfortable for you." "Is that a threat?" Arthur asked. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic bird in a cage, but his face remained a mask of stone. He glanced imperceptibly at the smoke detector on the ceiling, ensuring he was standing directly in the center of the frame. "It is a promise," Brock sneered. He reached out and grabbed Arthur by the lapels of his bathrobe, bunching the fabric in his fist. He shoved Arthur backward. It was not a playful push. It was a violent, forceful shove meant to assert dominance. Arthur stumbled back, his slippers losing traction on the tile. His lower back slammed hard against the granite edge of the island counter. A sharp bolt of pain shot up his spine, stealing his breath. He gasped, gripping the counter to keep from falling to the floor. Brock loomed over him, pointing a thick finger in his face. "Careful, old man. You are getting frail. People your age, they have accidents all the time. They slip in the shower. They fall down the stairs. Bones break so easily when they are dry and brittle." Arthur wheezed, the pain in his back radiating outward. "Are you threatening to hurt me, Brock?" "I am just saying," Brock whispered, leaning in close so Arthur could smell the decay on his breath. "Accidents happen. Especially when people get confused and stubborn. Do the right thing, Arthur. For your health." Brock held his gaze for a second longer, savoring the fear he thought he saw in Arthur's eyes. Then he stepped back, grabbed a banana from the fruit bowl, and walked out of the kitchen as if nothing had happened. Arthur remained leaning against the counter for a full minute, waiting for his breathing to stabilize. The pain in his back was a throbbing, hot pulse. He reached behind him and felt the tender spot near his kidney. It would bruise. It would turn a deep, ugly purple. Good, Arthur thought. He straightened up, wincing. He did not call out to Vanessa. He did not chase after Brock. He poured his coffee into a travel mug, his hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline dump. He walked slowly back to his bedroom, the limp in his step now genuine. Once inside, he locked the door and sat at his desk. He opened the laptop and accessed the cloud server. He rewound the feed from the kitchen camera by 5 minutes. The image was high definition and perfect. He watched himself brewing coffee. He watched Brock enter. He heard the audio, crisp and damning. "We are not paying you a dime." He watched the shove. He saw his own body fly backward and strike the granite. He saw the grimace of pain on his face. He turned up the volume for the next part. Asterisk, they fall down the stairs. Bones break so easily, asterisk. Arthur saved the clip. He backed it up to 3 different servers. He named the file evidence number 8, physical assault and death threat. He picked up his phone and took a photo of the red mark already forming on his chest where Brock's fist had bunched the fabric of his robe. Then he dialed Elias Thorne's number. "Mr. Thorne," Arthur said when the lawyer answered. "We have escalated. Brock just assaulted me in the kitchen. He threatened to push me down the stairs if I did not sign over the deed. I have it all on video." There was a moment of silence on the other end, followed by the sharp intake of breath. "Are you injured, Arthur? Do you need an ambulance?" "I am bruised, but mobile," Arthur said. "But I believe this constitutes immediate danger." "It constitutes a felony," Thorne said, his voice hard as flint. "I am filing for an emergency ex parte restraining order immediately. I will have a judge sign it within the hour. Stay in your room. Do not engage with them. By this afternoon, Brock Tate will be removing his things under police supervision." Arthur hummed up. He looked at the freeze frame on his monitor, the image of Brock's face twisted in rage. Margaret's letter felt heavy in his pocket. The audit was over. The liquidation was about to begin. The red mark on Arthur Sterling's chest had deepened into a blossoming purple bruise, shaped vaguely like a fist. He stood in front of his bathroom mirror, shirt unbuttoned, and photographed the injury with his phone. He took 3 shots from different angles, ensuring the lighting was sufficient to show the severity of the contusion. He uploaded them directly to the secure folder shared with Elias Thorne. Time check. 11:40 in the morning. Arthur buttoned his shirt, hiding the evidence but keeping the pain close. He sat in his armchair by the window, watching the street. He did not have to wait long. 2 police cruisers turned the corner, moving silently without sirens, their presence alone screaming authority in the quiet suburban neighborhood. They pulled up to the curb. 2 officers stepped out, adjusting their belts. One was holding a thick envelope. Arthur unlocked his bedroom door and walked into the hallway. He could hear the television blaring from the living room. Brock was likely watching sports, comfortable in his delusion of dominance. Vanessa was in the kitchen, clattering dishes loudly, a passive-aggressive symphony she performed daily. The doorbell rang. It was a sharp, insistent sound. Vanessa's voice drifted down the hall. "Dad, get the door. I am busy." Arthur did not move toward the door. He stayed in the shadows of the hallway. "Dad." Vanessa shouted again, exasperated. "Ugh, useless." He heard her footsteps stomping toward the entryway. She yanked the door open. "Yes. Can I help, oh?" Arthur stepped into view just as the uniformed officer asked, "Is a Mr. Brock Tate present at this address?" Vanessa's face went pale. "Why? What happened? Is he okay?" "We are serving a temporary protective order issued by Judge Harrison," the officer said, his voice flat and professional. "We need to speak with Mr. Tate immediately." Brock appeared behind Vanessa, wiping sandwich crumbs from his mouth. "What is going on? Who called the cops?" "Brock Tate." The officer asked. "Yeah, that is me." "Sir, You have been served with an emergency ex parte restraining order due to a credible threat of violence and physical assault against the homeowner, Mr. Arthur Sterling. Brock laughed, a nervous, barking sound. Assault? Are you kidding me? The old man tripped. He is senile. He is making it up. The officer did not smile. We have reviewed the video evidence submitted by Mr. Sterling's attorney. It is quite clear, sir. You have 10 minutes to pack a bag of essential items. You are to vacate the premises immediately and stay at least 500 feet away from this property and Mr. Sterling at all times. Video evidence. Brock's eyes darted to Arthur, who was standing quietly by the grandfather clock. You recorded me. Brock hissed, taking a step forward. The second officer stepped in, hand resting on his holster. Sir, take a step back. If you violate this order or threaten the protected party again, we will arrest you right now. Do you understand? Brock stopped. The reality of the situation crashed down on him. His face drained of color, then flushed a deep, humiliated red. This is my house. Brock shouted, his voice cracking. According to the deed, this is Mr. Sterling's house, the officer corrected. 10 minutes, Mr. Tate. Clock is ticking. Vanessa stood frozen, her hands covering her mouth. She watched as the officer escorted Brock to the bedroom to pack. The sounds of drawers being ripped open and clothes being thrown into a duffel bag echoed through the house. 10 minutes later, Brock was standing on the porch, holding a gym bag. He looked at Arthur one last time, his eyes filled with impotent rage. You will pay for this, Arthur, Brock spat. You are going to die alone. Arthur did not blink. Goodbye, Brock. The officer escorted Brock to his truck and waited until he drove away. When the cruiser finally pulled off, leaving silence in its wake, Vanessa turned slowly to face her father. She was trembling. Her face was a mask of betrayal. How could you? She whispered. He is my husband. He is family. You just kicked him out on the street like a criminal. He committed a crime, Vanessa, Arthur said calmly. He assaulted me. He pushed you. It was an accident. He was stressed. Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was not the lease. It was a printout of the spreadsheet summary. Stress did not spend $5,200 on a cruise upgrade, Arthur said. Stress did not spend $1,200 on custom tires. Stress did not siphon $42,000 from my retirement accounts over 3 years. He held the paper out to her. Vanessa stared at the numbers, her eyes wide. You think this is about money? She cried. This is about loyalty. We took care of you. Arthur dropped the paper on the hallway table. No, Vanessa. I took care of you. I paid the mortgage. I paid the utilities. I paid for the food you ate and the water you used to shower. And in return, your husband threatened to break my bones and throw me in a state facility. He walked past her toward the kitchen. Brock is gone, Arthur said over his shoulder. The restraining order is in effect. You and Caleb are still listed as occupants, but the 30-day notice on the lease I gave you yesterday is still ticking. I suggest you start packing, Vanessa. The audit is concluded. The liquidation phase has begun. Dad, please. Vanessa sobbed, collapsing onto the bottom step of the stairs. I cannot afford a hotel. I have no money. Arthur stopped. He looked at the daughter he had raised, the woman who had sold her mother's brooch for a fleeting taste of luxury. "Then perhaps you should have sold the custom tires," he said. He walked into the kitchen and poured the rest of his coffee down the sink. It was cold. He would make a fresh pot. He had a lot of work to do. The house was quieter now, but it was not yet empty. With Brock exiled to a budget motel on the outskirts of the city, the Sterling residence did not find peace. Instead, it transformed into a pressurized vessel of psychological warfare. Vanessa and Caleb remained, legally anchored to the property until the 30-day notice expired, and they utilized every hour to mount a siege against Arthur. The house became a battlefield of passive aggression and calculated noise. Vanessa paced the living room for hours, her phone pressed to her ear, relaying Brock's instructions and rage at a volume designed to penetrate the solid oak of Arthur's locked bedroom door. She oscillated wildly between tactics. In the morning, she was the weeping victim, sobbing loudly outside Arthur's room about how he had destroyed her marriage and orphaned his grandchildren. By noon, she shifted to the role of the righteous prosecutor, screaming that he was mentally unfit, cruel, and vindictive. Arthur sat at his desk, noise-canceling headphones on, watching the camera feeds on his second monitor. He saw Vanessa kick the baseboards in frustration. He saw her sweep a stack of his mail onto the floor and stomp on it with her heels. He did not engage. He simply logged the incidents. Then there was Caleb. The 19-year-old had finally looked up from his screens long enough to realize his comfortable existence was being dismantled. His rebellion was silent, petty, and destructive. Arthur watched on the monitor as Caleb walked down the hallway, dragging a house key along the freshly painted wainscoting, leaving a deep, jagged scar in the white wood. Arthur did not storm out. He did not shout. He simply noted the timestamp. 2:14 in the afternoon. Malicious destruction of property. He opened his spreadsheet and added a new tab labeled Deductions from Security Deposit. He estimated the cost of repainting the hallway at $400 and entered the figure. Later that evening, Arthur ventured to the kitchen to make tea. The atmosphere was toxic. Caleb was sitting at the island, methodically carving into the granite countertop with a steak knife. The sound of metal grating against stone was excruciating. Arthur stopped in the doorway. Caleb looked up, his eyes dead and challenging, the knife still resting in the groove he had created. "Boops," Caleb said flatly. "My hand slipped." Arthur looked at the gouge in the stone. It was deep. Irreparable without professional resurfacing. "That is unfortunate," Arthur said, his voice mild and detached. "That granite was installed the year you were born. It cost $3,000. Caleb shrugged, scraping the knife again. "Guess you should have bought better stone." Arthur poured his water. He did not engage. He knew that any reaction would be fuel for their narrative that he was the aggressor. He took his tea and returned to his room, locking the deadbolt he had installed 2 days prior. Safe inside, he pulled up the camera feed and took a high-resolution screenshot of Caleb with the knife. He added another row to the spreadsheet. Countertop resurfacing. $1,200. Vanessa began pounding on his door, the wood vibrating with the force of her fists. "Dad. I know you are in there. Brock says he is going to sue you for false imprisonment. He says you trapped him. You are going to pay for this." Arthur took a sip of tea. He typed a quick email to Elias Thorne, attaching the video of Caleb with the knife and the audio of Vanessa's screaming. Subject: escalation of property damage. Body: tenants are intentionally degrading the asset. Please advise on expediting the eviction process based on destruction of property. Thorne's reply came within minutes. Document everything. If the damage exceeds the value of the security deposit, we will file a civil suit for the remainder. Keep the door locked. Do not confront them physically. You are doing well. Arthur looked at the screen. He was living in a siege, trapped in his own bedroom while his family tore apart the home he had built. But he was winning. Every scratch on the wall, every gouge in the counter, every screamed insult was just another line item in the final audit. They thought they were punishing him. In reality, they were bankrupting themselves. He turned off the lights in his room, letting the glow of the monitors illuminate his face. He watched Vanessa on the screen. She was sitting on the floor now, drinking wine straight from the bottle, crying. It was a performance, he knew, designed for an audience of one who was no longer watching with his heart. Arthur felt a pang of sadness, sharp and sudden, but he touched the pocket where Margaret's letter rested. "Be the auditor," she had said. He looked at the spreadsheet. The balance was shifting. The liabilities were becoming too costly to maintain. The asset had to be liquidated. He closed his eyes and waited for morning. The morning sun illuminated the scratches on the hallway floorboards, revealing the extent of Caleb's petty vandalism in harsh, unforgiving detail. Arthur Sterling stood in a foyer, coffee in hand, looking at the house he had bought 35 years ago. It had been a sanctuary once, a place of growth and safety. Now, through the eyes of the auditor, it was merely a distressed asset. The drywall was compromised. The plumbing was likely clogged with grease from Vanessa's cooking. The atmosphere was toxic. He realized then that he was holding on to a sunk cost. Keeping the house meant keeping the battlefield. If he wanted to win the war, he had to scorch the earth. Arthur returned to his study and unlocked the door. He sat at his desk and dialed a number he had researched the night before. Eleanor Vance was the top real estate agent in his district, known for moving properties with ruthless efficiency. "Ms. Vance, this is Arthur Sterling," he said when she answered. "I have a property at 42 Oak Creek Drive. I want to list it immediately." "Excellent, Mr. Sterling." Eleanor's voice was professional and bright. "When would you like to schedule a consultation to discuss pricing and staging?" "I do not want staging," Arthur said, his voice flat. "I do not want open houses with cookies. I want a cash buyer, and I want a closing date within 45 days. I am willing to list 10% below market value to facilitate speed." There was a brief pause on the line. 10% below market in this neighborhood will start a bidding war, Mr. Sterling." "Are you sure?" "I am sure. The property is currently occupied by tenants who have been given notice to vacate. The sale will be contingent on vacant possession at closing." "I understand," Eleanor said, her tone shifting from sales to strategy. "I can have the listing live by noon. We will put a lockbox on the door, but given the tenant situation, we might need to schedule viewings carefully." "Do not worry about the tenants," Arthur said. "They are leaving." 2 hours later, a white truck pulled up to the curb. 2 men jumped out and began hammering a wooden post into the soft earth of the front lawn. Vanessa was in the kitchen, aggressively blending a smoothie to drown out the silence of the house. The hammering stopped her. She frowned, wiped her hands on a dish towel, and walked to the front window. Arthur stood in the hallway, watching her. He waited for the realization to hit. Vanessa pulled back the curtain. She saw the men. She saw the bright red sign swinging from the post. "For sale." The glass of the blender pitcher slipped from her hand. It shattered on the floor, exploding green liquid and shards of glass across the linoleum. Vanessa did not notice. She spun around, her eyes wide with a primal panic. "You are selling the house," she screamed. Arthur took a sip of his coffee. "I am liquidating the asset, Vanessa. It has become a liability. You cannot do that. This is my inheritance. That is my money. It is my equity," Arthur corrected. "And since you and your family seem intent on destroying the property value with knife gouges and scratches, I decided to cash out before you reduced it to rubble." Vanessa charged at him, stopping only when she remembered the cameras blinking above them. "You are evil," she hissed. "You are actually evil. Where are we supposed to go? You are making us homeless." "You have 22 days left on your notice," Arthur said, checking his watch. "I suggest you spend less time breaking my kitchenware and more time looking for an apartment." The phone in Arthur's pocket buzzed. It was Eleanor. "Mr. Sterling, the listing just hit the MLS. I already have 3 inquiries. A young couple, the Millers, are pre-approved and very eager. They want to see it at 4 this afternoon." "Bring them," Arthur said. Vanessa stared at him, her chest heaving. "You are letting strangers into the house. While we are living here." "I am letting potential buyers inspect my property," Arthur said. "If you or Caleb interfere with the viewing in any way, or if you make the environment hostile, I will consider it a breach of the lease agreement's conduct clause and move for immediate eviction. I suggest you go for a drive." At 4 o'clock, the Millers arrived. They were young, holding hands, looking at the house with the starry eyes of first-time buyers. Arthur greeted them at the door, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt. Vanessa and Caleb sat on the living room couch, arms crossed, radiating hostility. "Please, ignore the current occupants," Arthur said loudly as he led the Millers through the foyer. "They are in the process of moving out." The Millers walked through the house, admiring the crown molding and the spacious layout, politely stepping over Caleb's outstretched legs. They saw the potential. Arthur saw the exit strategy. By 6 o'clock, Eleanor called back. The Millers had made an offer. $850,000. Cash. 45-day close. They wanted the house, scratches and all. "Accepted," Arthur said. "But Mr. Sterling, we could get more if we waited." "Accepted," Arthur repeated. He hung up the phone. He walked into the living room where Vanessa was furiously texting Brock. "The house is sold," Arthur announced. Vanessa dropped her phone. "It is what?" "Sold. Closing is in 45 days. You need to be out in 22. He looked at the stunned expression on her face, the absolute devastation of a parasite realizing the host was dying. "I suggest you start packing," Arthur said. "And Vanessa? If you damage anything else, the cost comes out of your share of nothing." He turned and walked back to his study. The sale was pending. The liquidation was in progress. The final audit was nearing its conclusion, and the numbers were finally starting to balance. The acceptance of the offer from the Millers triggered a shift in Vanessa's strategy. The weeping victim and the aggressive squatter vanished, replaced by a calculated public relations specialist. If she could not stop Arthur with guilt or threats, she would stop him by destroying his credibility. She would paint him as a senile old man being taken advantage of by predatory real estate agents and lawyers, and she would paint herself as the heroic daughter trying to save him from his own incompetence. Arthur sat in his study, monitoring the local neighborhood social media group, a digital town square he usually ignored. He watched as a new post appeared, authored by Vanessa Sterling Tate. The headline was written in capital letters, "Urgent Community Alert, Protecting Our Vulnerable Seniors." The post was a masterpiece of fiction. Vanessa described a heartbreaking situation where her beloved father, suffering from sudden onset cognitive decline, was being manipulated into selling his family home for pennies on the dollar. She claimed he was confused, aggressive, and had fallen under the influence of a shady lawyer who was isolating him from his loving family. She ended with a plea for the neighbors to help stop this tragedy and support her in seeking emergency guardianship. Within minutes, the comments began to roll in. Well-meaning neighbors expressed shock and outrage. People who had known Arthur for 20 years but had not spoken to him in 5 were suddenly experts on his mental state. They offered prayers, legal advice, and promised to confront the realtors. Arthur read the comments with a detached fascination. In the corporate world, this was known as a hostile narrative takeover. It was a standard tactic used by embezzlers to discredit the auditor before the final report was released. He did not reply to the post. He did not engage in a digital shouting match. He saved the post as a PDF. He saved the comments. He added them to a new folder, defamation and libel. Then, he stood up and walked to the front window. He saw Mrs. Gable, the neighborhood busybody who lived directly across the street, marching toward his front door. She looked determined, her face set in a mask of righteous indignation. Vanessa was in the living room, peeking through the curtains. She turned to Arthur with a smug smile. "Mrs. Gable is coming over," Vanessa said. "She saw my post. Everyone knows, Dad. They know you are not well. You are going to be so embarrassed when the whole street rallies behind me." Arthur adjusted his cuffs. He picked up his tablet, ensuring the battery was full. "I am not embarrassed, Vanessa," Arthur said calmly. "I am prepared." The doorbell rang. Vanessa rushed to answer it, throwing the door open with a theatrical sob. "Oh, Martha. Thank you for coming. We are just beside ourselves." Mrs. Gable stepped into the foyer, her eyes darting to Arthur. He stood by the staircase, looking perfectly groomed and entirely lucid. "Arthur," Mrs. Gable said, her voice laced with concern and suspicion. "I saw Vanessa's post. Is everything all right? We are all very worried about you. Selling the house so suddenly. Is someone pressuring you?" Arthur stepped forward, extending a hand. "Hello, Martha. It is good to see you. I apologize for the drama. My daughter is understandably upset about the eviction, but I assure you, my faculties are intact." Vanessa clung to Mrs. Gable's arm. "See? He sounds fine, but he is not. He kicked Brock out for no reason. He thinks we are stealing from him. He is paranoid, Martha." Mrs. Gable looked between them, uncertain. "Arthur, if you are in trouble, if you need help." Arthur tapped the screen of his tablet. He did not raise his voice. He did not plead. He simply presented the data. "Martha, before you form an opinion based on a Facebook post, I would like you to see why I am selling the house." He held the tablet up. On the screen was the video from the kitchen. The high-definition footage showed Brock Tate, face purple with rage, shoving Arthur into the granite counter. The audio was crisp. Asterisk accidents happen. Especially when people get confused and stubborn, asterisk. Mrs. Gable gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God." Arthur swiped to the next image. It was the spreadsheet summary, highlighting the $42,000 in unauthorized transfers. He swiped again. The text messages from Vanessa threatening to put him in a state facility. "This is not paranoia, Martha," Arthur said gently. "This is documented elder abuse and financial exploitation. I am selling the house to escape a dangerous environment. Vanessa is not trying to protect me. She is trying to protect her access to my bank account." Mrs. Gable stared at the screen, then at Vanessa. The sympathy in her eyes evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard shock. "Vanessa?" Mrs. Gable asked, her voice trembling. "Is this true? Did your husband hit him?" Vanessa stammered, backing away. The video is out of context. Dad provoked him. You do not understand." "I understand what I see," Mrs. Gable snapped. She turned back to Arthur. "Arthur, I am so sorry. I had no idea. We, the whole neighborhood thought." "Vanessa lied to you," Arthur said. "Just as she lied to me. I would appreciate it if you could correct the record with the others. I do not want the Millers to be harassed when they move in." "I will," Mrs. Gable promised. "I certainly will." She glared at Vanessa one last time before turning to leave. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Vanessa. After everything your parents did for you." Mrs. Gable marched out the door, her phone already in her hand. Arthur knew that within the hour, the narrative on the neighborhood group would flip. Mrs. Gable was the most efficient information distribution system in the city. Arthur closed the door and locked it. He turned to Vanessa. She was standing against the wall, looking smaller than he had ever seen her. The smugness was gone. The weapon of public opinion had misfired and blown up in her face. "You can delete the post," Arthur said, walking past her toward his study. "But you cannot delete the truth. The neighbors know. The police know. The lawyers know. And soon, the judge will know." "I hate you," Vanessa whispered. Arthur stopped. He looked at her, searching for any trace of the little girl he used to carry on his shoulders. He saw only a stranger who owed him a great deal of money. "That is fine," Arthur said. "Hate is an emotion. I deal in facts. And the fact is, you have 20 days to vacate." He entered his study and closed the door. He sat at his desk and refreshed the neighborhood page. The comments were already changing. Mrs. Gable had posted a comment. "*I just spoke to Arthur. He is perfectly sane. But I saw videos of what has really been going on in that house. We owe Arthur an apology*. Arthur watched as the digital tide turned. The smear campaign was over. The audit of his reputation had come back clean. Now, there was only the final judgment left to face. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old wood, a scent that Arthur Sterling associated with finality. He sat at the plaintiff's table next to Elias Thorne, his posture impeccable in a charcoal suit. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat with a court-appointed attorney who looked tired and overwhelmed. Brock was absent, barred from the proceedings by the restraining order, though his presence loomed in the angry glances Vanessa shot Arthur every few minutes. Judge Harrison entered, his robes billowing like a storm cloud. He took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and looked down at the docket. Case number 4829. Sterling versus Tate. Petition for immediate eviction and restitution of funds. Elias Thorne stood. His opening statement was brief and devastating. He did not use emotional language. He used data. He presented the lease agreement, the bank statements, the video evidence of assault, and the social media posts where Vanessa claimed her father was mentally incompetent while simultaneously asking for money. Your Honor, Thorne concluded, this is not a family dispute. This is a systematic campaign of financial exploitation and elder abuse. The defendants have treated Mr. Sterling not as a father, but as an ATM machine with a pulse. We are asking for immediate possession of the property and a judgment for the $42,000 in misappropriated funds, plus legal fees. Vanessa's attorney stood up. Your Honor, my client is destitute. She has been a stay-at-home mother for 20 years. She believed she had a verbal agreement with her father to care for him in exchange for housing. The money, she considered it a gift. Judge Harrison peered over his spectacles at Vanessa. A gift? $42,000 in unauthorized transfers is a very generous gift, Ms. Tate. Especially when the donor is unaware of it. Vanessa stood up, tears streaming down her face. It was her best performance yet. I took care of him. She sobbed. I cooked. I cleaned. I sacrificed my career to be there for him after Mom died. And now he is throwing me on the street because of a few misunderstandings. He is confused, Your Honor. He needs help, not. Ms. Tate, sit down, Judge Harrison said, his voice cutting through her theatrics like a knife. He turned to Arthur. Mr. Sterling, do you have anything to add? Arthur stood. He did not look at Vanessa. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, I love my daughter. I wanted to help her. But I realized too late that I was not helping her. I was enabling her. The money she took was not for my care. It was for vacations I did not take, cars I did not drive, and luxuries I could not afford. I am selling my home to escape the toxicity she brought into it. I just want my life back. Judge Harrison nodded slowly. He looked at the evidence file one last time. The photos of the bruised chest. The spreadsheet. The text messages. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Judge Harrison ruled. The lease agreement is valid, and the defendants are in breach. The notice to vacate is upheld. You have until midnight on the 31st to leave the property. Failure to vacate will result in a sheriff's eviction. He paused, looking directly at Vanessa. Furthermore, regarding the financial claims, I am ordering a forensic accounting of all assets. If the $42,000 cannot be accounted for as legitimate household expenses, and based on the cruise tickets and custom tires, I doubt they can be, a judgment will be entered against you and Mr. Tate. You will repay every cent, Ms. Tate. Even if we have to garnish your wages for the next 20 years. Vanessa gasped, collapsing back into her chair. Court is adjourned, Judge Harrison said, banging his gavel. Arthur walked out of the courtroom without looking back. He heard Vanessa wailing behind him, a sound of pure, unadulterated self-pity. He felt no triumph. He felt only the immense, crushing relief of a burden finally lifted. The audit was closed. The judgment was final. Now, all that remained was the cleanup. 6 weeks after the eviction truck rumbled away, Arthur Sterling stood on the balcony of his new condominium in the Queen Anne district. The air here was different. It smelled of rain-washed pine and salt from the Puget Sound, not stale pizza and resentment. He sipped his coffee from a mug that no longer had chips in the rim. Inside his living room was a testament to his new life. It was smaller than the colonial house on Oak Creek Drive, but it was infinitely larger in spirit because every square inch belonged solely to him. There were no gouges in the walls. There were no stains on the carpet. There was only the hum of the high-efficiency heating system and the soft ticking of the grandfather clock he had salvaged and restored. The sale of the old house to the Millers had closed 10 days ago. The funds were now safely deposited in a high-yield trust at a bank Vanessa did not know existed. Arthur had used a portion of the proceeds to buy this condo outright. No mortgage. No debt. Just equity and silence. He walked to his workbench in the spare room which he had converted into a studio. He had returned to his passion for horology, the science of measuring time. On the velvet pad lay the vintage sapphire brooch. He had not sold it back to the pawn shop. He had kept it. It was no longer just jewelry, it was his compass. He picked it up, feeling the cool weight of the gold and the stone. He opened the hidden compartment one last time. It was empty now. The key had done its job. The letter had been read and internalized. He took a small slip of archival paper and wrote 2 words on it: audit closed. He folded it tiny and tight and placed it inside the locket, snapping it shut with a satisfying click that sounded like a lock turning on a vault. His phone sat on the desk. It was a new model with a new number known only to Elias Thorne and his doctor. He had heard through Elias that Vanessa was living in a small apartment 2 towns over, her wages being garnished to repay the $60,000 judgment. Brock was working double shifts at a warehouse to make rent. They were finally learning the lesson Arthur should have taught them years ago: the value of a dollar earned, not taken. Arthur felt no malice, only a distant, quiet pity. He put on his magnifying glasses and picked up a pair of tweezers. He had a mainspring to repair on a 19th century pocket watch. The mechanism was complex, delicate, and required absolute focus. For the first time in years, Arthur had all the time in the world. He was not lonely. He was solitary. And in that solitude he finally found the peace that Margaret had wished for him. He was the auditor no more. He was just Arthur. This story of Arthur Sterling reminds us of a powerful truth about the human condition. Family is not defined merely by blood or DNA, but by mutual respect, love, and care. Being a parent does not mean being a martyr, and setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty, but a necessary act of self-preservation. Arthur teaches us that it is never too late to audit our own lives, to identify the toxicity that drains our spirit, and to have the courage to close the account on those who exploit our kindness. We hope this story has resonated with you and sparked a conversation about the importance of protecting our elders and ourselves from financial and emotional exploitation. If you found value in Arthur's journey, please subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share this video with your friends and family to help us bring you more compelling and emotional stories every day. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Arthur was right to evict his daughter, or do you think he was too harsh in his final judgment? How would you handle such a situation in your own life? Please share your feelings from the bottom of your heart, as we truly value your perspective and listen to every voice. We wish everyone watching this video robust health, a life filled with joy and peace in every moment of your day. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Goodbye and take care.